Well, welcome everyone. Glad to see people here tonight. My name is Carlene Gardner, and I'm the director of McGill's Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, or MORSL. And on behalf of all of us, I'd like to welcome you to this session in our winter series called Did You Know? This is a series that aims to celebrate diverse faiths, beliefs, and traditions we find here at McGill, and to take a look into the role that religion and spirituality plays on campus through the eyes of some of the most important people here at McGill, which of course are our students. Before we dive into our topic tonight, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are on here as part of McGill. This land has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. And we hope that tonight we will continue in this long and sacred tradition of exchange, not as traders of goods, but as seekers of understanding. We honor, recognize, and respect the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we meet today, for those of us connecting here from Montreal. And if you are an immigrant or a descendant of settlers like me, I invite you to join me in reflecting on the long connection that Indigenous nations have had with this land, and to consider how our own selves have been shaped by the lands that we and our ancestors belong to. By honoring these connections and by opening ourselves to learning more about our Indigenous neighbors, may we forge new connections together and move ahead on the path towards reconciliation. Now, I realize not all of us might not be in Montreal, and we'll leave some resources for further exploration. McGill has a number of great resources, such as the Indigenous Initiatives Resource Hub, and of course, there's a great app called Whose Land that you can find anywhere you get your apps for your phone. Great way to look up who are the traditional stewards of the lands that you are on. Our panel tonight, this Did You Know series, ties into a couple of different areas of the work that MORSL does. First, it helps us to increase the level of knowledge and awareness of different religious and spiritual traditions while honoring the internal diversity of each faith and the unique experience and perspectives of each student. Another reason why these types of events are important for MORSL is that it generates opportunities to get to know each other, to connect with other students for whom their faith matters. And third, another dimension of discussions like tonight's panel is that we can add even more layers and more dimensions to religious and spiritual life as we witness the role that faith plays in the personal and public life of students. So some of you might know that tonight's panel is actually the second installment of a series that spotlights students of faith. We began last month by hearing from 4 Muslim students, and next month we'll be hearing from a few Jewish students. So tonight we have the privilege of listening to a diverse group of Christian students who will be talking about their achievements, contributions, aspirations, and concerns as leaders in their communities, which is a role that they take on in addition to being students at McGill. We hope that as you listen to your peers, your fellow travelers in this journey through university studies, that you'll find connections with your own experiences and hopes, and that you may come away from this discussion with an even richer view of the many dimensions of religious and spiritual life on campus. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to my colleague Matthew for a few introductions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Bergen. I am the programming associate here at MORSL. I am also a student at McGill. I am a student at the School of Religious Studies, and I research on the intersection between the Hebrew Bible and immigration. And tonight, we are so excited to have various groups of our Christians group on campus, represented by a variety of students. We want to get to know each other, particularly our panelists. We want to know who they are and whom they represent and what they do here at McGill, and what level of their studies they are at. So I'll start with Cassie.
Hello, everyone. My name's Cassie. I'm in my 4th and final year of my undergrad studying cognitive science and German. And I am one of the key student leaders for McGill's Cloud Ministry.
I'm Lyman. I'm a PhD student in the sociology department, and I'm here to represent the Graduate Christian Fellowship, which is basically the graduate student branch of InterVarsity Fellowship.
My name is Ariel. I'm in my 5th year studying music education, and I am here representing the Newman Catholic Student Society.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We know our panelists and we know the groups they represent, and we thank all of us for attending this particular event tonight. I will quickly transition now into our first question, and I'll actually direct this question to Ariel. You go first. And this is a question of, you represent the Newman Catholic Students Society.
Yep.
Tell us about Newman Catholic Society and tell us about this group that you represent, their history. How did you guys begin and how has it been for you all these years?
Sure. So the Newman Catholic Student Society, which is specific to McGill, is actually part of the larger international network of the Newman Society, which is something that was started back in 1878 at Oxford University, and it is a student society that's named as a tribute to, at the time, Cardinal Newman, but now he's a saint, so Saint John Henry Newman. And the McGill addition to this name, the Newman Society, is the Catholic students, because that's what we're really here for. We're here to serve and also to be a home for the Catholic students on campus. To be completely honest, I'm not sure when the Newman branch of the Newman Society was founded, so can't really speak to that. But I can say that we still carry that spirit of St. John Henry Newman was an academic. He was also a priest, and he was of the belief that university life and Catholicism can intersect, and there's definitely also room for friendship and fellowship as a student, as a Catholic, and that's something that the Newman Catholic Student Society, and I believe all other Newman societies, really strive towards.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was a lot of history crammed together in a few minutes. The Graduates Christian Fellowship is, as I understand, Mr. Lyman, is part of the InterVarsity Fellowship. How long have you guys been meeting? What is the origin of the particular group, and why specifically the graduate students?
Yeah, so the Graduate Christian Fellowship is a pretty recent thing. My understanding is it really just got started in maybe 2015 or 2016 on McGill's campus, because there was a group of graduate students who felt that there would be a benefit from having some formal Christian fellowship associated with life on campus for graduate students, and particularly, of course, for generally for Protestants. It's not closed to other varieties of Christians, but in practice, most of the participants are varieties of Protestant. And so there was thought that we should have a group. And I think some of the founders were familiar with the undergraduate InterVarsity Fellowship and had some background with it. So they basically just extended to graduate students. InterVarsity is sort of an interesting animal historically and internationally, because it has a massive rivalry with the Newman Society, not because of the Catholic Protestant thing, but because of Cambridge Oxford. So IVF started at Cambridge. And then it actually spread to Canada. Was like the first place it spread after the UK in like the 1930s. And then from Canada, it spread to the US and elsewhere. So IVF has coming up on 100 years of history in Canada. And McGill has actually had off and on IVF activities for quite a few decades. But graduate students tend to be a little bit helter-skelter in terms of whether they want to do fellowship on campus or whether they're at a stage in life where they kind of have a church home that they're primarily connected to. So our group tends to draw in graduate students not from the Montreal area, although we do have a few who are from the Montreal area, because they're people less likely to have sort of a long-term church home that is kind of their primary source for spiritual feeding.
Really quick, you use the word fellowship a lot there. For someone who is not a Christian, listening to you would wonder, what is that? What does that mean?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess it is sort of a church word, but it has an implication of both hanging out with friends, having time together, doing things you enjoy together. So we just had like a group that all went skiing together about 2 weeks ago. This weekend, I think there's a group trying to go snowshoeing. So, things like that are not particularly religiously coded, so to speak. But then the idea, so why don't you just call it like graduate hangout or something? And it's because we're not only doing casual social activities, right? We also have regular Bible study and norms around, praying for each other. And there's a sense that fellowship means social time together where people are investing in it, not only because these are their favorite people in the world, but also because it's seen as valuable simply to have that Christian or like-minded companionship. So I guess that's an answer, though maybe there was even more like verbiage in there that could obscure more than it answered.
No, you did. I think someone benefits from that explanation for sure. Thank you so much for that wonderful background to your group. Casey, power to change. In fact, I really like the P2C thing on your screen right now. So what is power to change? Was that the name all along? And how long have you guys been meeting on campus?
We have not always been called Power to Change, actually. I guess that's how we differ from some of the other groups represented here. And we also did not start in Canada, but we didn't start in the UK. We started in California at UCLA in 1951. And back then it was called Campus Crusade for Christ. And the US chapters of the equivalent of Power to Change are still called CREW, which is an abbreviation for that. We didn't come to Canada until the 60s, in 65, where the first chapter was founded at UBC. I unfortunately don't know when the McGill chapter specifically was founded, but sometime in between 1965 and when I started here in 2018. As for what P2C is all about, our main vision is that we want every student on McGill campus walking closer to Jesus and experiencing life in him. And the way that we go about that is we help all people to take their next step towards Jesus, whatever that looks like for them at their point in their life. Everyone is on some sort of faith journey, and we like to sort of, I guess, tailor that experience towards people to meet people's individual needs. We, of course, have Bible studies and things like that. We meet every week for like a social sort of gathering. We have discipleship groups. We have personal one-on-one discipleship opportunities available. And I know this is using a lot of like Christianese. Discipleship just means like one-on-one spiritual mentoring, as we are called to do in the Bible. But along with those experiences that are tailored specifically for Christians, we also have outreach opportunities. We partner with this organization called Alpha, which is a sort of course on what is Christianity, and it's a safe place for people who are not Christians to come and ask any questions that they may have and learn more about the Christian faith. We also do outreach opportunities on campus where we go and serve our fellow students. Pre-COVID, that involved making goodie bags, like during final season when everyone's really stressed out, like with candy and encouraging notes and handing those out in the library. Since COVID, we have done like an outdoor prayer station where we hand out free coffee and just have a sign like asking people, can we pray for you? So yeah, opportunities since COVID to do those kinds of outreach events and serve our community have been limited, I'll say. But I think we will end up talking more about that later.
Thank you so much. And thank you for breaking down these words that are so familiar to your group that many of us may not necessarily be familiar with them. I really appreciate the diversity, not just in the groups as we see them, but even in the history of these groups. And even Casey, even though you do not remember the history or where it began here at McGill, I think that speaks of itself, of how old the group is on campus, that even perhaps people do not remember when it began because it's been here for so long. So that's really beautiful. I will pass it now to Colleen to ask the next question.
All right, sure. Thank you, Matthew. I am really learning a lot already tonight, just hearing what people are saying. It's really interesting to see, the different origin stories and whether they're young stories or, ancient ones from 100 years ago or more, but also to see how the different groups are connected to campus life, some of the activities that you've done on campus. And I know it's been difficult with COVID to really connect the way we want to. I was wondering if we could go around the panel again and get a little bit of an idea of, some of the activities that you feel are really close to your group's mission, that really meet a need or a challenge that you're responding to as a group. Because I think we often have, maybe a higher level mission statement from a national organization or from a broader church, but specifically on campus or in the Montreal community, what are some of the challenges that you see? What are some of the needs that you see, or gaps or opportunities that you feel that your group is uniquely positioned to meet? And I think I'd like to start with Ariel for this, if you don't mind.
So I think, just speaking from personal experience, coming to university, I think what the Newman Catholic Student Society, and also because we work out of the Newman Center on Peel Street, which is just off campus, in case anyone here hasn't had a chance to visit, it's that the NCSS really serves as an intersection between student life, community life, and spiritual life. And I say that because, especially with the more recent years, we've tried to keep up with a rhythm of gatherings, a steady rhythm of things that the community can do together. And that can range from the really spiritual things such as praying the rosary together. And for those who might not know, the rosary is a Catholic prayer that has a very rich and old tradition, and it's something that is also very geared towards the liturgical calendar and the liturgical year. So we do try to have these events that keep our spiritual roots alive. But at the same time, we also have, let's say, like bi-weekly Saturday night events. Often it's supper, or maybe it's other gatherings that often welcome McGillians and non-McGillians of various ages and various backgrounds. And pre-COVID, we also did a lot of sandwich runs and other charity projects, which we are actively looking to start back up again. So stay tuned for that. So I think the most important thing that we've done so far is, I think, showing our community and showing even the current members of the NCSS, that what we do as students, what we do as friends with each other, can really exist in tandem with us being Catholic or even non-Catholic. All of this can exist together. And I think that reflects well in the calendar of events that we've chosen to keep, especially after COVID. We had to make some choices about what's more important, what do we want to curate. And I think the collection that we have now and events that are coming up, which again, stay tuned, really goes towards keeping a community alive, welcoming new people, and also having, I keep saying rhythm, but yes, but having a rhythm to always come back to, having a rhythm, having a community to always return to after all the other things that we're also doing. So I think that is what I think is the most important, and I'm personally the most proud of with my generation.
Awesome. I hear the music student in you coming out, the rhythm of the events.
And the rhythm of the events, the rhythm of the, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And I know a lot of our panelists touched on this a little bit in the introductions, a little bit about what their group does. And we did kind of get a sense of this blending of the spiritual and the social as well. And I think that COVID has really made us not take that for granted, right? To be able to have these opportunities to connect, to nurture each other spiritually, and also to keep those social ties. I don't think one is superior or inferior to the other. I think they go nicely hand in hand. Thanks for sharing that. Cassie, you talked a little bit about some of the campus initiatives that you had been involved with. I guess we can say in the before times, before COVID, being out on campus. What are some of the things that you've been getting involved with in the last couple of years? If you can give us a few examples. And, it's perfectly okay if things have changed over time, if you feel like the group's focus has changed, because clearly our context has changed in the last couple of years as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hate to sound like a broken record repeating what everyone else has said, but I think one of the most important things that P2C has offered and personally has offered me is community and the support that comes with that. Like during COVID, I think a lot of this sort of being forced to go online has forced us to, I guess, do a lot of introspection and realize like maybe there's more that we could be doing to meet the needs of those in leadership within Power to Change. Because in the before times, there were a lot more opportunities for outreach. And then in the after times, not so many, right? It's like we only really have each other. How can we be serving each other and serving God in that way? So ways that we do that. And of course, these are things that existed before COVID, but at least for me personally, things that I have come to appreciate so much more. Even if these interactions are mostly on Zoom now. We do discipleship groups, which are kind of a mix of Bible study and just personal spiritual mentoring and just like having a place to go and rant about your week if that's what you feel that you need in the moment. And we also have personal discipleship. I know I touched a little bit on that beforehand, but for those of us in leadership, we do have a discipler who is usually a full-time staff member with Power to Change who have special training to be able to guide us like practically and spiritually throughout our lives, issues we may be dealing with. Like my discipleship time with my discipler has sort of turned into just therapy, which is really nice that like Power to Change offers that, for free to the people in leadership so that we can be supported to help support the rest of the ministry.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. That's really beautiful. And I don't think I think it's quite necessary to repeat what others have said when you say community, because it is so critical. It is really not something we're, I think, going to be taking for granted again in the future on the other side of this. And looking also at our spiritual communities as ways to build resilience, ways to take care of ourselves, ways to care for others, and to build up a better mental health as well. So super, super important stuff. Thanks for sharing those great initiatives. And Lyman, I wanted to get your take on this because, graduate students, as you said in your introduction, are a little bit of a different beast, right? You have different schedules, different preoccupations. Some of you have families and just a different life rhythm. So what are some of the needs that you see the Graduate Christian Fellowship meeting on campus, whether that's for your fellow students or for yourselves as leaders, as Cassie was talking about?
Yeah, good question. I guess I should start by noting I'm not actually an orange person. I just happen to be in front of this like weird fluorescent green background. So I sort of noticed on my camera, a very interesting skin tone here. So, I mean, graduate students are kind of an odd bunch because you do have some who, like me, who have married and have kids, and others who are sort of fresh out of undergrad and at a considerably different stage in life. But a commonality that we see across a lot of graduate students is that they're at the end stage of the searcher learner period. That they pretty much have to have quite a lot of things figured out on a pretty constrained timeline, which means that you have a lot of people who kind of feel like they have to have their life figured out in the next 24 months, which can be stressful and it can be challenging. And it means that there's a lot of need for mentorship, for effective role models of people just one step ahead, for people who can demonstrate viable strategies for dealing with the fact that, I mean, I hate to give bad news to the undergraduates here, but that often you finish 4 years and discover that you have absolutely no idea what you're doing and that there were no jobs in your degree. And for your undergrad, it kind of is like, well, you know, something will happen because I'm getting this nice broad education. But then in your graduate degree, it's like, well, no, you're not getting that nice broad education that's applicable to anything. Like, this is specialized for a specific job. It had better exist. So it creates a unique kind of stress that we find. There's a lot of demand for people to get together and cope together. But then also, if someone's in a first or second or third year of a program, those are big differences in terms of where they are in terms of their research, their job search, their next steps. And so they can be a valuable source for knowledge and information about what's next.
I definitely hear the sociologist in you, Lyman, coming out when you're talking about the different life stages and where people are at. And there certainly is a sacredness to the choices that are being made at that level in terms of, the commitments to vocation, to life partner, and a lot of things that are very much wrapped up with faith and spirituality. So I imagine having a group of fellow Christians could be a really important part of supporting you through this process.
Sure, because in any kind of, in most cases, when we encounter a juncture in life that is sort of, it feels high stakes or high stress, these are the kinds of life junctures that virtually all faith traditions exist to respond to on some level. Their social function, regardless of their theological truth, but their social function is largely to provide people with pathways and scripts and tools for dealing with those kinds of, okay, so what do I do next in my life questions, and providing those scripts. And so the view of most of the people in GCF would be that there's a lot of quite bad scripts out there for how to deal with the life juncture of graduate school. There are a lot of pathways that appear viable socially and in our peer circle that in fact are likely to be very adverse in terms of the broader spiritual projects that we might see in our life. And so it's useful to have peers and sort of next step role models who can demonstrate a course through a stressful time that seems better to the prospective people in the group.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, we're coming back to that theme of community indirectly, community and mentorship and role models that we have. Thank you so much for answering that question, all of you, around, kind of what's at the heart of your mission these days. I'll turn the floor back over to Matthew to continue with our questions for the panel.
We can always talk about our missions and paint them and imagine how they will be. The question is, how has it been for you for you as a group in terms of trying to live out this particular mission? Do you see any challenges that have come? Where are the successes? Where do you see success? What are you hearing, from the ground, particularly interactions with students who are not necessarily Christians or people of your faith? What has that been like for you?
Again, I'm sure, I can think back on like my undergrad days when I was in the American version of Power to Change, Campus Crusade. A bit of an unfortunate name, but and it's a very different experience as an undergrad than as a graduate student, because as a graduate student, I talk to my advisor and I might talk to my peers, but basically being a graduate student can be very isolating. There's not quite the same intensity of frequent interaction with all these other people. So it can be a bit different, though on the whole, I don't think I've had an experience of it, and I don't think most people in GCF have had experiences of any negativity from people on campus. They're not getting an experience of oh, it's so painful or hard or difficult to be a Christian. But I mean, certainly there's no normativity to it either. To make the choice to live as a Christian, and particularly, I mean, GCF is going to be pulling typically from your more conservative evangelical Christians. So that's, I would identify that way. There's certainly no, even if there's no like adverse experience, like it's pretty obvious that your best strategy is to be silent about who you are. That's the one time my religion has become known in a class. It immediately became a topic of conversation among students and professors. So not in like a hostile way, but just like, oh, there's one of those. How interesting. And I think that's pretty common. That we have students who just know that they have to not really talk about what they think and what they believe, because doing so will impact relations with faculty supervisors, with peers. There's a pastor in our denomination who's pastor and a legislator who's on trial for various crimes in Finland right now for a book they published 15 years ago. So there's an awareness that most of us kind of just have to be quiet for our own career progress and safety. But you don't get active negative experiences. There's just a pretty clear awareness that your position is not normative. And so by revealing it, you are revealing that you are not within the mainstream McGill's community.
Thank you so much. Do you see any successes that the group has achieved so far? I had a bit of challenges.
Sorry, was that still to me?
Yes, your group.
Yes, I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, during COVID, during the dark times, it was like there were a couple of weeks there where there were like 4 of us on a Zoom call, kind of like, let's just get through this. But I mean, now we end up with, regularly like 15 people or so, sometimes as many as 20, which, like, again, for graduate students, like, that's a massive crowd. Like, this many graduate students does not gather in one place under like almost any circumstance. Yeah, I mean, we've got a really big group, lots of stuff happening. And as far as our group is concerned, success, I mean, it's always nice to have a big group, that's encouraging, but success occurs if we are faithfully proclaiming the word of grace and mercy to believers in graduate school who need to hear it in order to feel fed and supported as they are getting through their graduate program. And if it so happens that also we are able to do outreach on the campus and speak to other people who are not believers, that's wonderful too. But the first purpose of GCF in particular is really to give support and a home to students who are coming from essentially an evangelical background, which again tends to mean, especially international students. Turns out Quebec and Canada more broadly does not have a huge population of like conservative evangelicals. So this is disproportionately international students, though not exclusive.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think those experiences, those personal experiences, personal anecdotes really are very meaningful in terms of how you are experiencing your faith, and the experiences of your group on campus are very informing and really inspiring. I will pose the same question to Casey. How has it been for you, especially living in these, in words of borrowing ones from Lehman, dark days or dark times with COVID?
Yeah, I think Lyman put it pretty well in saying that, like, as a Christian on McGill or at McGill, like, especially because the attitude towards just religion in general in Quebec is so different than, for example, the Bible Belt where I come from, in that you don't face active opposition. You're most certainly not persecuted. And I don't want to give anyone like the idea here that we're, complaining, oh, everyone's out to get us, because that's not right. But it's definitely not normal to hold the views that we hold. I have a lot of, personal friends who like are interested in my faith and will ask me questions, but it always just kind of seems like I'm some sort of, I don't know, artifact they're like, oh, good for you, Cassie. I'm glad that religion works out for you and, gets you the community and, the spiritual, fodder that you need in order to feel good about yourself, pat you on the back, whatever. It's always what it feels like. And again, it's not an active like, oh, you're a Christian, Christianity's horrible, you shouldn't, adhere to that religion. It's never that. And even pre-COVID times when we were on campus doing outreach events, I don't think I ever got anything like that. Like all of my interactions, tabling, talking with other people about my faith have been rather positive, and there are a lot of people who are curious, but it's usually from a standpoint of more like an academic standpoint, if that makes sense, like just wanting to have like this head knowledge and not realizing there is so much more behind it than just head knowledge. As for challenges during COVID within the ministry specifically, a lot of us have felt isolated, less so this semester, or this past semester, because some things were back in person, but this past year, my third year, where everything was online, was really difficult. And a lot of times when we would have meetings like with all of the leadership team and the staff, instead of getting to like all the things we had on our agenda, we would just sit and like lament for like 30 minutes how we couldn't be on campus. We don't have this time in person and community anymore. Like all of these ministry events just feel like another Zoom call that I have to go to. How do I serve my community? How do I serve my disciple? How do I serve those in my discipleship groups when I'm just Zoom fatigued all the time? So it's gotten better since being back in person, definitely. There is a big difference between Zoom ministry and in-person ministry. Not that God doesn't work through both, he definitely does. And through Zoom ministry, we've been able to reach more people in a way because you don't have the restriction of like, you have to be in the same place physically. Like that's what happened with the Relevant McGill series, if you know what that is. Last year we partnered up with U of T, so we got to reach a lot more people with those talks. Yeah, that's how it's been with COVID. It's nice to be back in person.
You mentioned these relevant meetings. You want to say something a little bit about it? Because I think you guys have really had more meetings around that and met regularly on that.
Yeah. So I think all of the other panelists here, or I think most of the other panelists here, have been involved in that to some degree, or should at least know what it is. But Relevance is this series of talks that happens every January, where all of the Christian groups come together, and we invite a bunch of speakers to come and give talks just about Christianity and spirituality and faith, sometimes more pertaining to social issues, sometimes pertaining more to theology or apologetics, or what it's like to be a student and Christian. And we have 1 or 2 talks every day, and that's like our biggest outreach event of the year because all of the Christian groups get to come together and work together towards that. Pre-COVID, I've had a lot of fun tabling because we'll just like have a big whiteboard that has a really like controversial hot button issue, like is pornography evil or something like that, and we just have people come up and write like a yes or no, or maybe just put a tally mark behind one of those. And then if they want to talk about it, then we ask them, okay, why do you say that? And those usually lead to some really interesting conversations. So I've had some really good conversations with people as a result of that. And then we invite them to our talk that evening where we talk about the same issue. What I really like about Relevant is that we talk about things that are not talked about in church a whole lot. So it's accessible, not just to people who are not Christian, but also like answers a lot of burning questions that Christians may have, and they've never heard these issues talked about.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much. Ariel, NCSS is a really very strong community on campus. What has been your successes? What has been your challenges? And how do people feel about you guys on campus?
I think if I were to speak internally speaking, I think COVID has posed a lot of issues, but not just in terms of we couldn't gather in person, but because it really, in the past 2 years, it really put forward the urgency that continuity is so important. Because so many of me, I'm graduating pretty soon, and a lot of the current execs are also graduating, and turnover rates, especially in student groups and in undergrad, are always faster than we think. I went into this thinking, oh, I have 4 years. Yes, I had 4 years, but that was just 4 years. And I've already come to the end of it, and I'm just doing more studies. That's why I'm still here. But a lot of my friends have gone on to other places. So continuity was very difficult in COVID, but things are looking up. We have some new execs and I love working with them. And so I think that's a really good sign. Also, I think the NCSS has the unique privilege in the McGill context of working with the Newman Center, which means that even if we couldn't have meetings in person, we could still have one-on-one meetings, for example, in person. And even now we can still see each other in person, or even if it gets really busy, pre-COVID times, we could still at least go to Sunday Mass together. So there's also that, I think, unique position that we have that really helps us with our ministry. And another internal thing that I think has been important to us, regardless of the COVID situation, was keeping our Catholic identity and mission central, even though we're organizing all sorts of events. And I think this is something that sometimes could fall by the wayside. And bringing it back can be as simple as saying a prayer before a meal, for example, because we eat together quite often. Even just that, I think, can be really centering and really grounding, and it's always important to remember, and often we don't. So I think that's been a challenge. And the whole prayer before a meal actually segues really well into how other people perceive us. Once people are in the door, even though some are not Christian or some are not from McGill, I think everyone that I've worked with in the NCSS have had the attitude of, I'm going to cross myself, I'm going to say grace, but you do not have to. I just ask that you be with me. You don't have to do the same thing. And I think that has always gone over really well, and there hasn't been any complaints. And for people who haven't come to events, for me personally, I have invited some friends. Some have shown up, some have not. But I don't think the Catholic label or the Catholic name has ever really posed a problem. Or maybe some people were apprehensive. I wouldn't know. But I think that kind of comes down to the power of a personal invitation and the power of being friends. Because I would often invite people with whom I am already friends. And so because they know me and I know them, and this is coming from me personally, but also it is coming from the church, that combines really well, and people realize that it's not just about evangelization, even though it is really important. It's about forming personal connections, and that's what we're really here for. That the Newman Center can handle a lot of the theology, and there is a wonderful chaplain, Father Anthony, that some of you might know, and it's amazing when people come to us through that avenue. But the NCSS is really there for the personal connection, and everything else you want to learn, we can also help you, but there are also further resources. So I think that's been really important in I think helping the community realize that we are Catholic, but that doesn't take away from us being friends or people, really. And it really is lovely just seeing the community come together. And some of our conversations can be very technical and very theological, and we ask each other questions. But that's another important part that has been a challenge, but I think is getting better, that we should be asking questions and we can ask questions. The whole point of faith is not just blind belief, but also understanding more, understanding each other, understanding the church. And that's also where the Newman Center comes in, and that can really support our learning, support our questioning. But even amongst all that, there are more lighthearted and fun gatherings, and they can exist together. And all these experiences can be really bonding. And I think we're all trying to find our place in the world and in the church, and this kind of community is really important to that journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ariel, and thank you for sharing these experiences. You know, I remember Kalin and I attended one of your masses and on our personal capacities, and we had fun. We felt really connected and connecting to the community there. And if you guys haven't had a chance to visit Human Center, one of these fine days, try. And of course, Father Anthony is very warm to interact with. I think what is coming out from all of us here is this connection that comes as a result of expressing our faith to wherever we are. And what I hear from you is by opening up about your faith, you have had connections, either people curious with curious questions, asking for follow-up conversations, or people who are actually interested in forming connections. And I think these are beautiful, beautiful experiences that you guys are sharing and that you've had on campus. I'm going to invite Khalid now to ask the next set of questions.
Sure, thank you. Always super, super interesting to hear all of the stories, all of the challenges, but also to really get a sense of the energy and the potential. And everyone here tonight is, a perfect example of that. We wanted to wrap up our panel discussion tonight in the next 20 minutes that we have with kind of imagining the future. And we talked a little bit about the past. We started with back 100 years in Oxford and in Cambridge and so forth to the United States and California. We've taken a bit of a journey, but and we've also talked a lot about how rapidly the university years just fly by, how much turnover there is. So now you have an opportunity, and I know some of you are close to graduation, if not this year, then next year or very soon. So this is probably a good time to ask you to kind of project yourself 20 years in the future. You're coming back to McGill. It's your 20th class reunion, 2042, can you believe it? Long way down the road. Lyman's going to have his daughters behind him, probably at least one of them already enrolled at McGill. And this is an opportunity for us to kind of give ourselves a little time capsule here and think about, what would you hope to find for Christian students in particular, but for any students of faith as well. We talked about the Quebec context. We talked about, the kind of questions we get, the way academia is. What would you hope to see in 20 years? And I'll kick it off with Cassie, and we'll go around the table.
Thanks, Carlene. It's a really good question. I think I personally would like for specifically the Christian students to know that there are resources for them and that there is support for them, and that engaging in spiritual life is not just another thing to check off the box, be like, oh, I did that. I can pat myself on the back now. I'm a good Christian. Now I don't have to worry about that for the rest of the week or the day. Like, it's so much more than that, and that there is so much joy and support that comes out of it. So I would hope to see students engaging in, for example, Bible studies and discipleship and just being in Christian community, not out of a sense of obligation because they feel that God commands them to, but because they actually want to and they have a desire to get to know God better. And out of that desire also comes a desire to serve other people, serve other Christians, and serve the rest of McGill campus as well.
Wonderful. That's a beautiful answer. Thank you, Cassie. Ariel, Catholicism has been around for quite a while. It's going to be here in 20 years? I think it's going to be here in 20 years? And what's it going to look like for McGill Catholics?
Something that I would really want future McGillians to know, be they Catholic or not, is to reach out, to take some initiative. I know it can be really scary when you arrive on campus and maybe you're from somewhere completely very far from Montreal. I know that's where I was, but taking that first step into the Newman Center, meeting that first friend, has opened up a completely new community to me that I cannot imagine my McGill life being without. And I've always known God because I was born into a Catholic, or as my immediate family is Catholic, so I've always known of God. But because this is a step that I took, or I was guided to take, it was like, now this was my chance to meet God personally as Ariel, not just as my mom and dad's kid. And yeah, of course, both have very, very amazing value in it. And I think it wasn't only getting to know God, but also meeting everyone along the way. I don't think I would be here speaking with people from MORSL, from P2C, from so many people if I didn't take that first step. So I think I would really encourage everyone to go for that step. If the first one doesn't work out, that's okay. Try another one. That's fine. And I think in specifically the NCSS's context, honestly, as long as our relationship with McGill and the Newman Center remains strong, and as long as the Diocese of Montreal exists, I think we'll always be around. I think maybe we'll have new traditions. We'll for sure have new people because we always come and go. But I think the spirit will be the same. Faith and community. I hope, and I really think it will be the same. We would love to meet all of you, and we welcome all of you, and we hope that you're also willing to meet us.
Absolutely. Thank you for those beautiful words and that wonderful invitation. As Matthew said, we've had the pleasure of being welcomed at the Newman Center many times, and it's always been quite a warm welcome. And the privilege of having bricks and mortar on campus, it makes it a little bit easier maybe to imagine a future 20 years down the road where you say, yeah, we're still going to be here. There's something solid to hang on to, even though there might be some other changes underneath. Lyman, when you look 20 years down the road, what do you hope to see for graduate students, Christian graduate students on our campus? What would you hope for their life to look like?
You will be Dr. Lyman in the first place.
Sorry, what was that?
Yes, thank you. I should
Be Dr.
say
Lyman.
future Dr. Lyman.
Yes.
What would you like what would your hope
think-
be? What would you hope to find on campus when you come back for your 20th reunion for
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the things that everyone else have said are things I want to agree with. I want to see people having these spaces and opportunities to flourish. But I have to say, when you asked, what would be your hope for what campus would look like in 20 years? And, this may, of course, sound like terribly sectarian, but hey, I'm a Protestant. Sectarianism is like our gig. Is that I would hope to see a great revival of faith and to see a huge share of McGillians be in love with Jesus Christ and proclaiming him as the Son of God. And I know that is like kind of corny to say, and it's not highly ecumenical. But I am a political liberal in that I want to live at peace with my neighbor and ensure that people of all creeds and backgrounds have an opportunity to flourish as people. But in terms of my personal hopes, yes, I desire to see the truth proclaimed in every corner of the world to every person and to have every person believe it. So in 20 years, what would I hope to see? An enormous growth of Christianity on McGill's campus. And so that's not like a sexy answer on like how would you like to see the campus? I'd like to see more people agree with me. But that's my honest answer. And honestly, and I think actually probably most people do in fact hope for something like this. We hope to see the institutions and communities that we feel a part of and care about. We hope to see them ratify things we believe are good, true, and beautiful. And particularly, I mean, in 20 years, I'll have 2 kids who are college age, and hopefully more on the way. But I mean, there's 2 guaranteed because they're already here. And yeah, I want to be able to send them to a place that I know and love, and that I can be confident is going to be a trustworthy steward and encourager of their development as humans, which to me, their development as humans means first and foremost their catechesis and strengthening in faith, and only secondarily their development of skills for employment or knowledge of good cocktail party facts, right? So my first hope would simply be an efflorescence of faith, which is like a very that's like a very evangelical, here I am representing like the sectarian evangelical group. So of course that is my answer, right?
Perfectly on brand, Lyman. Perfectly on brand. And you had quite a bit of welcome I saw from the audience too. So I think part of it starts with making the conversation around faith more normal to begin with, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I believe we have come to the end of our round table of questions. We do have a few minutes remaining if there are any audience members who would like to ask some questions of any of our panelists, or to perhaps share some experiences as students or comments.
Carlene, could I perhaps ask a question?
Absolutely. Panel
this
to
is
panel, let's do it.
if this is off topic, please correct me, or like please, it's fine. But I'm actually curious about MORSL. How did MORSL come about, and what's the story there? Because I know that I'm here because the NCSS has formed a relationship with MORSL, and I'm assuming that's the case for most people here. And I'm wondering how did that come about? What's your ministry?
What's my origin story? All right, in not the Marvel universe, but in the McGill universe, where do we come from? So I've been in this role since 2014, and I don't have an exact origin date like some of the folks have had, but I know that McGill has had a chaplaincy, a Christian chaplaincy, since at least the 1960s. And it was actually housed physically inside the Newman Center. We were either, I don't know if we were squatters or renters, but we did have some space inside the Newman Center way back. And that's our origin story in terms of being connected with chaplaincy at McGill. And over the years, the range of the kind of chaplains who were serving McGill students expanded beyond, Catholic, Protestant. That was interfaith back then, right? To adding, a Jewish chaplain, and then later a Muslim chaplain. That was pretty radical, around the 90s. And really being fully interfaith, I'd say, by the 90s, and of course being incorporated into McGill's family of student services, right? So now we are no longer just kind of a collection of volunteer chaplains or Christian clergy who would have been, I guess, sort of lent out to the McGill community from their home congregations, to actually a more professionalized chaplaincy service, serving all students of all backgrounds. So it has really evolved over the years, and I think this is something that, to Lyman's point about developing the whole student, this is something that's really come back into vogue. For a while it was many universities in the United States, and Oxford and Cambridge are also examples where they had a very religious core to the founding of the university, and then we had a whole wave of really secular universities, and kind of a separation of, studies is one thing, faith is another. And I think now, since the 80s, 90s, we're really starting to come back to an acknowledgement that faith matters to people, that we're not just here to develop, skill sets, things to put on a resume, but we're looking for compassionate and creative citizens to solve some really challenging problems that lie ahead of us. And part of that comes from the way we see the world through faith, the other things that motivate us that aren't just like the economic and social factors. So I think there's a bit of a renaissance. So we really have developed into this kind of organization that supports students' personal religious and spiritual development, but also opens a window into understanding the other.
And I have a question for you guys, if there's no one else in the audience. Are your clubs open to other people who are not of your faith? Are you able to have them in your events? Attend, these interfaith relations that, sometimes we talk about. And so, yeah.
I mean, honestly, the quick answer is, of course. Yeah. I mean, it'd be great. It's always, I think, really, really good to see more people, and some people are already really familiar with being Catholic or Catholicism in general. Some people are not, and that's totally fine. That's a part of the reason why we're there. That we're there to partially show people what being Catholic means, and our events will have a Catholic element, like I previously mentioned, like prayer before a meal, for example. But that doesn't mean that if that is not within your practice, you are not welcome. No, you are welcome. And actually, the NCSS, I think a lot of our interfaith efforts have fallen by the wayside, unfortunately, especially in light of COVID, and just had to pick our battles and priorities. But that is something we're trying to bring back. And it's not just a one-way thing where we want you to learn about us, but also we want to learn about you, or we want to learn about how we coexist, how we can speak with each other, how we may have overlapping roots. I am not an expert, but I know that there are a lot of faith traditions that maybe have developed out of similar histories. And so, yeah, of course, everyone's welcome. And if there is ever an interfaith event that other faith groups are holding, we'd also love to attend. It's yes, of course.
I'm just gonna like build off of some things that Ariel has already said, but like the whole point of Power to Change is to bring people closer to Christ. And a big part of that is how do we talk about Christ to people who don't know him. So we are constantly having conversations of like, how do we make our events more accessible to people who didn't grow up in the church or who are still like on some sort of spiritual journey and want to learn more about Christianity. That is like the aim of a lot of our events. Some events are geared more towards people who are already more established in the faith. But outreach is a big part of our ministry. I forget who said this, I think it was Ariel, but saying like evangelism is not just about going and like, you know, shoving the gospel down people's throats, but it's about building personal connections and making friends with people. And then through that, they come to see how you live out your faith and they're curious and they ask questions. So yeah, of course, there is space for people who are not Christian at our events because that is how we have purposefully designed a lot of how the club operates.
Yeah, I mean, I think GCF is somewhat similar in that anybody can come, anybody's welcome to come. I mean, a lot of our events are like, we're gonna go skiing. So like that's, to the best of my knowledge, non-Christians can ski. I haven't like confirmed that, but that's the rumor I hear. So yeah, I mean, it's easy enough. However, I mean, it is a Christian group. And so if a non-Christian comes, they run the serious risk of someone praying for them or perhaps inviting them to church or engaging in other threatening activity, such as asking them questions about themselves. So it's welcome, but it is a Christian group. And so, you know, I'd love to say, like, oh, not I'd love to say, I mean, of course, yeah, no one wants to like shove the gospel down anyone's throat. And in frankly, in the society that we live in today and the demographic of people attending graduate school, you don't have a lot of like shovers. It's just not really who applies to go to graduate school at McGill. It's not like the average, just like personality wise, this is not like your typical like engineering graduate student or whatever. At the same time, you know, I think, you know, it is a group that has people who forthrightly believe that evangelism is a good, valuable, and loving thing, a loving form of interaction with your neighbor. My wife and I, before McGill, we were called missionaries in Hong Kong, and she remains so, serving with a church here in Montreal. If a non-Christian comes, they'll be totally welcome. We'll have a great time, and they run the serious risk of someone expressing care to them in a Christian fashion.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Any closing remarks as we bring this plane to the runway?
It's been too long since we've traveled. We've forgotten our plane terminology. Go ahead,
Any
Kat.
closing remarks?
I just wanted to, thank you, Carlene and Matthew, for organizing this. This has been a really good experience for me to get to learn from other people. And thank you, everyone who is attending as a non-panelist or non-organizer. Very glad that you devoted this time to educating yourself on these things.
Well, we thank you. The feeling is very mutual. For us, it's been a real honor to be able to prepare this session with our students here at McGill. And we are recording this, so we know this is a busy time for students, but it will be available you know, in future weeks for people to look back on and to see what they've missed. And, you know, for myself personally, and I'm sure I speak for Matthew too, our last experience doing this with our Muslim students we spent an hour and a half talking, or an hour and 45 minutes, and it was one of the most enjoyable parts of our week. And this morning when Matthew and I were preparing for tonight, we were like, I'm so looking forward to this. This is going to be a highlight of my week. And it has not disappointed, at least in my part. It's been a real pleasure to be here with all of you tonight. So thank you so much for not only your time, but for sharing so genuinely and so openly about your experiences as students here at McGill. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much.